Hey guys, before we get this party started, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Live Nation Colorado and the Fillmore Denver. We got a big month of March ahead of us. Obviously, we started the party with 3-6 last week, but it doesn't stop now. We got concerts this week, so make sure you're following along on social media at Live Nation CO and at Fillmore Den, DEN. And then also with this year, we will be adding a couple new promotions and things going on following along, so give us a shout out and a follow as well at Stoned Appetit, and then be sure to be on the lookout. Free giveaways, swag bags, everything on the sun. And then obviously there's concerts going down at Summit, Marquee, and everywhere that Live Nation works with, so be sure to go over to livenation.com for all your ticket needs and check out that calendar because it's going to be a big year. Let's go, boys. Cheers.
The suppression of the use of marijuana and of the forces lurking behind it are the most important jobs this department is now engaged in. In 1930, the records on marijuana in the Washington office of the Narcotics Division scarcely filled a small folder like this. Today, they fill cabinets.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Coloradians and everyone that's smart enough to listen from the outside.
One of the most amazing plants we've ever discovered.
The pot party, the trippers, the grasshoppers, the hip ones, all gathered in secrecy and flying high as a kite.
I get, maybe 20 or so minutes of your time, maybe talk a little bit about, I know we're the first stop on the tour this year. I want to learn a little bit more about this. I have some friends that are big whiskey collectors, including a member of our team. Our native on our team is a big whiskey guy and has a couple thousand bottles in his collection. So I had some Pappy 15 last night. So I'm trying to get prepared and knowledgeable in the ways, but I'm hoping you'll be able to help me in that regard as well.
All righty.
But I appreciate you joining me. Hopefully.
It's good to be here.
There we go. I threw headphones on to avoid the doubling of the noise going on. So for our listeners that are just tuning in, I'll do a little bit of editing throughout, but I'm sitting down with Mr. Douglas Smith, the gentleman who is the founder of the Whiskies of the World tour events going on. For those that don't know, next Friday, or this Friday, as you're listening, this Friday, March 13th at the Four Seasons, we will be hosting an event where you'll be able to sample not only local whiskeys from Colorado, but some from around the world. And so we're going to pick Doug's brain, as we do with all of our guests, learn a little bit more about how the party came to fruition and how the company did. But Doug, I appreciate you joining us.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. It's always good to talk about whiskey.
I tell you now, most guests, when they do say that, they usually regret saying they're happy to be here about 20 minutes in. So hopefully we won't wear out our welcome.
Okay, well, I have to pour myself a glass of whiskey if it gets strenuous here.
Hey, there you go. So we're obviously, for those that maybe we're not in the same room, where are you dialing in from?
From San Jose, California.
Okay, so you are on the Pacific Coast. So technically it's perfect time to start busting open the bottles.
Yeah, I got to start getting ready for lunch.
Well, Doug, I guess our usual first question we ask all of our guests are you a transplant or a native? But I figure since we already know you're in San Jose, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself. How'd you find yourself in love with whiskey and deciding to come up with this badass event?
Well, it's an interesting story. So I'm a engineer by training, by trade, and I was always looking for a kind of a moonlighting and something to do by looking at buying a bar, and then this opportunity came up to take over Whiskies of the World. So actually I didn't found it. I took it over. It had been running for 10 years in San Francisco, and I loved the idea about it. But to be honest with you, whiskey was a product for me that was, from college days. You had to mix it with 7-Up. When I was in college, 7-Up.
The 7 and 7, I remember those days.
In order to pilot it, but I liked the idea of the business. And so I bought it. And then when I started learning about whiskey, it's like, oh my God, this is why you have a cult following, because it's a matter of appreciation, like art appreciation. You learn about the art, you learn about architecture and different things and what goes into it. You develop a much greater appreciation for it. But all of a sudden you realize, wow, there's a cinnamon, there's a vanilla, there's these different essences of flavor that you find in this whiskey. Really? Didn't know that from college years because you're just shooting it. You're supposed to sip this stuff. That's the cool way to do it. And then once you start but I've always been an Epicurean. I enjoyed the food. But once you figure out, man, this is so deep, it's like concentrated flavoring. And it's like, my God, it's easy to fall in love with. And when I meet people, it's like, oh, I don't like whiskey. It's like, because you never learned how to drink it proper. It's an education. And so, yeah, that's what I'm big on. I'm really big on food pairings and really getting the essence of it, sipping it. And I love doing blind tastings where you give people different products, from a bourbon to a rye whiskey to a malt, which is finished in different types of cask, and really exploring how those little minute differences make in the product.
So, I mean, I'm the first to admit that I'm not very well knowledgeable, and one thing that tickled my fancy about this tour and the events are, while I will be there because I enjoy catching the righteous buzz, and I think a lot of our followers do as well, but y'all also have teaching things going on. So like you mentioned the pairings, and also you mentioned things like taking notes or finding the notes of vanilla and other things. And it reminds me a lot, we have a lot of sommeliers that have joined us for the wine world and have kind of expressed that same thing. Is that kind of what I'll be learning a little bit about in these courses, is like how to kind of go from the average Jim Beam or Jack Daniels drinker into what you're looking for when you're tasting a Weller, or, I mean, obviously Pappy is the sexy name, but some of those bigger names are like more higher value bottles. Was that what we'll be learning a little bit about?
So, yes, absolutely. So what makes the event successful is when any level of whiskey knowledge or whiskey experience is coming away with learning something new. You learn new ways to taste the drink, new ways to experience in your palate. And everybody works differently. But when you find, like, wow, this glass actually makes a difference on how the whiskey tastes. Why is that? People don't realize how important that glass is. In training, it's the olfactory. It's your olfactory senses, which are much more sensitive than your taste bud. So the shape of the glass delivers those aromas to your nose differently. And then, when we start introducing like chocolates or cheese or different foods, and you're tasting it for a different purpose, and you're like, yeah, I see that cinnamon, I see that nutmeg, I see that tar, and these other things, tobacco, tar things. It's like, doesn't sound appetizing, but in a whiskey, it's like the flavors are intense. And then you start learning how to put that with different chocolates. Chocolate's kind of easy place to go, but determining, wow, milk chocolate and a dark chocolate really go better with different types of whiskeys, and exploring that with your palate. I mean, these are really the fun things to do.
So I feel like chocolate is like, I don't know if it's necessarily like the status quo, but I feel like that is, like you mentioned, I mean, it's delicious on its own, but at the same time, it is kind of something that accentuates other flavors. So is there other things that we should be looking for that bring out those notes? And I'm going to pick your brain for the next half hour. I just want to learn more about whiskey so I can speak about it, so I can also be a little bit more knowledgeable. How does one identify these flavored palettes, or these tones and things that you mentioned, like the nutmeg and such? How does one kind of develop a palate for that? And I mean, I know we started with the glass and how that kind of helps bring it out, but is there a way to go about it from just being the casual and then working your way up? Because I don't think I could identify those kinds of notes when tasting a bourbon or a whiskey, because it kind of burns, it almost is like a burning in the throat. How do you get past that stage? Drink better whiskey?
Again, there's many things you can learn here. Everyone's palate's a little bit different, because I've been drinking for quite a while. I don't get burned so much. Some people like that burn. And if you don't want the burn, I mean, there's little tricks by coating your palate with water first. Put water in your mouth, and then you follow it with the whiskey. Now the whiskey is going to be sweeter, lighter. You're going to get more flavors out of that. But that's what's so intense, exciting about it, because there's many ways to drink it and many ways to get the flavor. Do you put water in it? Do you put ice in it? The big deal is if you want ice in your whiskey, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Ice is going to inhibit certain flavors. It's going to make it sweeter, smoother. And maybe as your palate develops, you don't want the ice because you want to pick up some more bold flavors. The level which typically a lower proof will bring out more flavors. So I ask a distiller, I think it's a Corsair, why do you distill this at a higher proof? Because at that proof, we want to accentuate the cinnamon or some other kind of flavor that comes into it. Mm-hmm. And then you have the ability to add a little bit of water to it. So now you have, many different drinks there. or you put the ice because it makes it sweeter. You know, Johnny Walker likes to do a thing where they take their Johnny Walker 18 Gold and they freeze it. It's hard to freeze, right? So you get it so close to zero temperature, comes out, it's in a champagne flute, and you drink it. It's a really sweet, smooth, more of a liqueur. And it's just a fun thing to do. So, yeah, there's so much there. You know, the bottom line is figuring out how to appreciate your way. Do you want the burn? Do you want just the flavor? But how do you identify this? It all is based on your experience of flavors and what you've already experienced, right? So there's no wrong or right, you know, when you're tasting it and giving out your notes. But it's, you know, you've been to the pier before. You smell the tar on the pier post. Like, yeah, I kind of feel this essence in the flavor in the finish. And so you describe it the way you know it. And if you're having trouble with that, then you try to find some whiskeys that are somewhat basic, don't have a lot of different things going on to them, but they very strongly accentuate a certain flavor. It's like, oh yeah, I can pick that up. And so it can be a palate training experience. You do the different smells. You smell the coffee beans, the different the malts, the corn, and the cinnamon or the chocolates. You smell different things, and you try to find those in the whiskey. So fun exercises like that to develop your palate.
That does sound like a fun exercise. Just taste testing and sampling. And so that's kind of what we'll be doing a little bit of this weekend. And you mentioned something like a Johnny Walker. That's a pretty big name brand. And then we have those local Colorado guys. So I do want to talk a little bit about the event that we have coming this week, because I guess my best question will be is, I'm going to start with, what is your drink of choice? We'll go through there. Are you a Scotch guy? Are you a whiskey guy? Do you have a
So whiskey is a superset, right? So anything which is fermented from grain and then distilled and aged in a barrel, that is whiskey. So bourbon is a whiskey, right? Scotch is a whiskey. I'd like to refer to it as malts, because Scotch is typically made from malted barley. So when they call malts, it just means it's malted barley. And because that was the grain that was abundantly available in Scotland. So that's what they made it from. You know, in America, what was available was corn. So we made the bourbon. But it's all whiskey, but it has distinctly different flavors because of the grain being used, the distillation process, and then the maturation process, which is the aging in the barrel. And so I don't have a favorite of choice. If I'm having a salad with a little cilantro, I like a rye whiskey. And that goes great because the rye kind of has a herbal essence to it, which cilantro and other things in your salad might bring out. The blue cheese on the salad dressing is very nice with a light malt from the Highlands, which are lighter and fruity. And so that's what's fun is whiskey goes with salad. It does.
That's the first time I've heard that. So that's news to me. But you know what? I didn't need too many more excuses to drink with it while I eat my salad. But you just gave me a good one. That whiskey pops with the blue cheese. So you got me sold. You sold me on it. You mentioned, you don't have a specific one you like. We talk with our native. Shout out to Sam Barretts and Brian Littman. What's your collection look like over there?
Oh,
deep.
So much collection. I don't know. So I have my own basic whiskey cabinet that I created. Basically, I had a hard time finding cabinets that really would fit a lot of whiskey. Because,
what a tough problem to have.
18 inches deep, right? So you have 3 or 4 levels of bottles, and you lose the bottles in the back. So I had my own cabinet design, which was with tiers, and so you can kind of see all the bottles. It's efficient, for a smaller space to store it, because I didn't have time to put racks all around the house.
So are your friends are probably stoked when you're hosting the pregame or the happy hour or the dinner parties? Everyone's like, fuck yeah, Doug's having the party. We're going to be sipping on some nice Pappy this evening.
Yeah, kind of. I do have expectations of me. And I do things that people, it's like, really? Donut and whiskeys? And they show up anyway. Like, my God, this was so much fun. I never thought about it.
So is that kind of like, you mentioned you took over the reins of this niche market, but it's also got this very hyper-intensive community. And, one thing that's been really neat to the Colorado community is I'm in a Facebook group. It's the Colorado Bourbon and Rye Society. A friend of ours runs the American Whiskey Society, which is a social